Good evening and welcome to CYC News for today, the 12th of July 2015 AD and the 5th of Abib 1731 AM. I'm Anastasia Atia. In today's headlines, His Holiness Pope Tawadros, same-sex marriage is an approach to atheism and humanity is in crisis. Pope Francis in a tour visit to South America. Number of Syrian refugees passes 4 million. Baltimore mayor sacks police chief months after riots, and Canada wildfires, thousands flee homes in Saskatchewan, British Columbia. His Holiness Pope Tawadros II, Patriarch of the Coptic Orthodox Church of Egypt, expressed his concern for humanity as being in a moral and religious crisis at this time, whereby many are turning towards the atheism and supporting same-sex marriages. His Holiness added that morals and religion are what protects humans and they are the godly commandment and the civil ruling. He mentioned that there are 4 needs for human beings. They are categorized into physical or biological needs, psychological needs such as freedom, security and appreciation, mental needs such as education, knowledge and reading, and the needs of the soul such as belief in God, forgiveness of sin, eternity and heaven. His Holiness Pope Tawadros said that there is a serious evolution among humans at this time, where people use their mind and temper as a means of rebelling and doing anything they wish to do, which eventually leads to atheism and all forms of extremism. On another note, His Holiness Pope Tawadros has declared that the weekly Wednesday sermon at the Grand Cathedral in Cairo will cease until renovations have been completed in 2018, when they will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the cathedral. Pope Francis, Pope of the Catholic Church in Rome, has toured Bolivia in a pastoral visit to South America. He started his tour in Ecuador, leading a mass where more than 1 million Catholics attended. Pope Francis calls for a new system of global justice based on human rights and care for the environment rather than economic profits. He also told educators that the purpose of education is not to boost social status or to increase wealth, but to find creative ways to help the poor and save the environment. Bolivian President Evo Morales received Pope Francis, where he calls on people to value one another and look after the marginalized people in society.
Who are rejected and excluded. That's the Church's preferential option.
Going to Africa, as members of the Somali Shabab militant movement killed 14 quarry workers, including more than 10 Christian workers, according to Kenyan officials, during an attack carried out last night on a residential complex in northeastern Kenya to target Christians living there. The Shabab movement carried out a number of attacks inside Kenya and said several times before that it would continue the attacks until Kenya withdraws its troops from the African Union force that is fighting the militants in their stronghold in Somalia. According to observers and political analysts, this attack will put great pressure on the Kenyan president to enhance security procedures in response to the attacks of the movement, whose worst attack caused death of 148 people at the University of Garissa in eastern Kenya in last April. In Syria, more than 4 million have fled abroad to escape the conflict in their country, according to the United Nations. This surge in the number of people crossing into Turkey has increased the total by 1 million in just 10 months. More than 7 million others have been displaced in Syria since the start of the uprising in March 2011. The head of the UN's refugee agency, Antonio Guterres, called it the worst humanitarian crisis of our generation. The agency has received less than a quarter of $5.5 billion, it says it needs this year to help Syrian refugees and the countries hosting them. To the US, where Baltimore's mayor has sacked the US city's police chief, saying his leadership had become a distraction from fighting a crime surge. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake said she was replacing Police Commissioner Anthony Batts with his deputy, Kevin Davis, from an interim period. The city was rocked by riots in April when a black man died after suffering injuries in police custody. 6 officers were charged over the death of the 25-year-old Freddie Gray. The US Justice Department is also conducting a civil rights review of the Baltimore force, and Mr. Batts has been criticized by the city's police union. In Canada, thousands of people have fled their homes as hundreds of wildfires burn, sending thick smoke as far south as Colorado. Member of Parliament Rob Clark said that more than 13,000 have evacuated in Saskatchewan after 60 communities, as there are 113 active fires. Canadian broadcaster CBC reported that 15 homes in Montreal Lake had been destroyed by fire. In another part of the province, one cabin owner had been watering down his home at Nebine Lake for 2 weeks and clear-cutting some trees. But forecasters at Environment Canada predicted that that would change as the chance of showers increased to 60% overnight. There is the same 60% chance of rain on Thursday. Turning to the economic crisis in Greece, the Greek government has formally requested a third international bailout to help pay its debts and prevent economic collapse and ejection from the euro. The European Stability Mechanism, which acts as Europe's financial rescue fund, confirmed Wednesday that Greece has applied for a new bailout package. Greece has already received two massive bailouts worth roughly 240 billion euros, which is equivalent to $265 billion, but needs more. The latest bailout program ended last week. Greece then missed a big debt payment to the International Monetary Fund, becoming the first developed economy to default to the fund. The European Union is expected to decide Sunday whether to grant another bailout program, once it receives more details about Greece's economic plans. Mainland Chinese shares rebounded on Thursday after regulators took further steps to try to calm the stock market. The Shanghai Composite Index reversed earlier losses to close up 5.76%, its biggest percentage gain since 2009. Analysts said that a move to ban big investors from selling stocks may have helped to support the market. Meanwhile, the state-run news agency Xinhua said police were investigating vicious short selling on the country's stock market, and authorities would crack down on operations that had broken the laws and regulations related to trading. According to new research, Australian house prices are 30% undervalued compared with the cost of renting. Reserve Bank of Australia economist Peter Tulip said that the Australians would be financially better off buying a house than renting. Mr. Tulip said low interest rates made it to the best time in 30 years to buy rather than rent, local media reported. His comments come at a time when house prices in Australia's capital cities are out of reach for many Australians. Prices for Sydney residential property are so high, some people have predicted the market will bust. Mr. Tulip said his findings were based on changes in bond prices, which implied mortgage rates would remain at record low for a further decade. The Reserve Bank kept Australia's official cash rate steady this week at a record low of 2%. And our final story is a serious one about the heroin use in the US, which has surged in the past decade as experts say people used opioid painkillers are increasingly turning to heroin as a cheaper high. The US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, reported that the number of heroin users rose by 63% between 2002 and 2013. The increases are found among people of all income levels and most age groups. The CDC reported that over 8,000 people died from a heroin-involved overdose in 2013, nearly twice the number of deaths seen just 2 years earlier. The amount of heroin being brought into the US has also increased, driving down the cost of the street drug. And that's all for CYC News. Stay tuned for more Christian content on CYC. I'm Anastasia Atia from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia. Good night and God bless.